Welcome back to Scherable, another Scherable After Dark episode on Sunday night. And want to talk about the prospect that the Trump campaign might be completely tanking, that the bottom could fall out, the wheels come off. And this is obviously not close at all for the rest of the campaign. Now, a lot of folks have electoral PTSD from 4 years ago after Access Hollywood. Though Hillary's numbers shot up, they actually had gotten kind of tight in September, but Hillary wasn't quite her peak, but close to 7-point lead in the Real Clear Politics average by mid-October, and then the letter happened, and so on and so forth. So we should all be aware that such things can happen again. Others have noted, as have I, that this is not 2016. This has been a much more stable race. Trump's an incumbent, much harder to see what could happen that would change the game. But, no one expected the past week's events to have occurred, so who knows what might transpire over the next few weeks. But it seems to me that it is not implausible that what we saw in the NBC Wall Street Journal poll this morning, which was Biden 53, Trump 39, as of today, that's an outlier, but it could be a harbinger to a widening of the gap following the debate and following the COVID diagnosis. Up until this point, and I'm still not going as far to make predictions that that Trump is going to go below 40 or stay in the low 40s for the rest of the time, because it has appeared that he has a pretty hard floor. He has a very loyal base. His job approval average is around 45 right now, I believe. In that NBC poll was 43, but it would seem like he can only go down so far because he has his loyalists. But I picked up enough anecdotal stuff over the course of the last few days to suggest that core base might be a little smaller than 45, 46. There was a comment from a retired pastor in Pennsylvania who was interviewed in a New York Times poll of Pennsylvania, who said he's always voted Republican, he's pro-life, but his definition of pro-life is getting broader beyond just overturning Roe and getting judges, and he's not excited at the prospect of Amy Coney Barrett. He's starting to think about being pro-life for the born as well as the unborn. And similarly, in a Politico article about Michigan, Tim Alberta there interviewed two women at a Alyssa Slotkin event, the first-term Michigan Congresswoman, and they said been Republican, pro-life, been Republican largely because of abortion, and that Trump has made them change their minds about their view of putting abortion, above everything else, and that it's just as important to think about policies that would allow for women to not have to choose between abortion and a job, for example. This is their wording, and that stuff was said before the debate. I think before the debate. And before the COVID diagnosis. So it's not just about that. But it seems like Biden's strategy of running a depolarizing campaign, not waging overt culture war, not pushing a lot of hot buttons, or to the extent that he does, to the extent that he says he talks about systemic racism, for example, he often leavens it and pairs it with appeals to the white working class, talking about his Scranton roots. There was a great example in the CNN town hall he did last month where he was asked by Anderson Cooper have you benefited from white privilege? Now here's a concept that kind of rankles the white working class. How dare you suggest I'm benefiting from white privilege because I get kicked in the teeth all the time? And Biden, right out of the box, said, sure, I don't have to go through what my black brothers and sisters go through. Then he quickly, it was a very abrupt pivot. You might have even caught the pivot if you weren't paying close attention or rewatching the tape. But then he immediately goes into how, living in Scranton, you're used to people looking their nose down on you. You don't have an Ivy League degree, all that kind of thing. And then he went on and talked about people like Trump who had everything given to them and squandered it. Those are the people that he has a problem with. So he found a way to answer that question. He didn't do the crude, I know exactly what black people are going through. I'm white working class. This is what I've gone through. He didn't do that, but he still said both things as a way to show sympathy and empathy for different groups. And I just think that entire approach, it makes it easier for someone who is anti-abortion to not feel they have to pick a team on that subject and then be a partisan from that point forward. They can take a breath. They can have nuanced thoughts. They can think about the idea of voting for the other party on a host of other issues. I mean, that's what depolarization is. I mean, polarization forces you on one side or the other based on a few signals. Depolarization allows for that kind of fluidity. And so I think that was already happening to some degree. And then you get the debate, and then you get the COVID diagnosis. And so and we're seeing other anecdotal evidence of Republicans who are not spinning that was a good debate for Trump. They might be making excuses. They might be expressing some displeasure, but not necessarily abandoning him. But there's almost nobody out there arguing, maybe Hugh Hewitt and a few other hardcore types, but it's widely accepted that Trump has lost that debate, and it's showing up in that NBC Wall Street Journal poll as well as some others. And if that's the case, if that's creating an extra or an additional tipping point, a breaking point for a different class of people, perhaps Trump can go below 45%, and then you're getting into real landslide territory. And now I'm going to give you a little bit of a preview of my column for Real Clear Politics, which is coming out tomorrow morning, about the Electoral College and whether Democrats are they really fundamentally disadvantaged in the Electoral College, or are we going to be seeing a change in the demographic breakdown of the country? And you look at, 538 has done an analysis that says, Biden needs to win, not needs. If Biden is winning by more than 3% of the popular vote, he has a very strong chance of winning the Electoral College. But if it's below 3%, then Trump is actually the favorite. You have different degrees, whether it's 0 to 1% or 1 to 2% or 2 to 3%. And that's feeding the argument that this is structurally skewed to help Republicans. Democrats can win, but they have to go the extra mile to win. And the reason why I think it matters if the bottom falls out of the Trump campaign is it opens your mind up to the possibility that these so-called structural advantages are not at all permanent. Yes, Republicans have won two of the last 5 presidential elections without the popular vote. And that seems to me because they have been able to exploit the cultural divides and polarization in the country. Gore, even though Gore was a Southerner like Bill Clinton, Bill Clinton in '92 really blows apart the notion of the Northeast liberal Democrat. and performs very well in the South, as well as it does well in the Southwest and the interior West. Even won Montana in 92. But then Gore, even though he's from Tennessee, he's known as a big environmentalist. At this point, Bill Clinton did the Brady Bill, but Gore is getting more identified with gun control. And you also have the Monica Lewinsky affair hanging over the race. Perhaps that is rankling the social conservatism of some people in these areas. And that whole Southern inroads that Clinton had gained back evaporate. And Bush is able to win. Now, granted, if the Supreme Court didn't step in, Gore probably would have won Florida on the merits. But it was that close because the cultural landscape was advantageous to Republicans, and that shows up again in 2016. Obama does very well, winning with more than 50% of the vote 2 times in a row. No Democrat had done that since FDR. But you're also seeing signs of that polarization. When Obama wins in 2012 with a narrower vote than 2008. 2008, he wins by 7 points in the popular vote. It's down to 4 in 2012. And what's really striking is there are only 4 states in 2012 that are decided by less than 5 percentage points. That's very unusual in a close race. The race is close nationally, but there are almost no close states. That tells you that this is a polarized country. Now, at that time, a lot of Democrats, myself included, thought whatever divides are happening in the country, they favor us. We're getting on. We got the upper hand here. There's not enough white working class, not enough white evangelicals. We're winning too big in big states like California, New York, Illinois. We got that blue wall in the Midwest, and the demographics are going to continue to trend in our favor from this point forward. So we're in pretty good shape. And 2016 obviously upends that thinking. Now, those demographic trends might still benefit Democrats. And in some ways, I think people weren't fully expecting that the fact that South Carolina has a close Senate race and even has Biden close in one poll. I mean, that might be an outlier poll, but the fact that there's even one is shocking. And that says what blue trends were happening in North Carolina and Georgia also are in play in South Carolina, even if they're a bit of a laggard compared to those two. You're also seeing the blue trend in Texas. You're seeing it pretty robustly in Arizona. But I don't think you can say as confidently, especially after 2016, that demographics are going to save the day on their own. And there's nothing Democrats have to do beyond that point. I think the combination of that with Biden's depolarization strategy is broadening the big tent of the party and building a potentially very robust, if tenuous, coalition that includes traditional Democratic constituencies and some hard left ideologues with relatively right-leaning, college-educated suburbanites, particularly in interior, non-coastal states or coastal Southeast. If that is what's happening, and that leads to a very wide Biden margin, in my mind, that says Republicans can change. Right-wing independents can change. Things aren't so static. What you think are permanent structural obstacles may not be so permanent. And what we don't know, and I'm not going to make predictions today, is if that is pretty clear in the results, in the exit poll data, and what we're picking up anecdotally, that you have a somewhat decently sized right-leaning faction that is fed up with Trump, fed up with the bombastic approach, fed up with the narrow issue set, and is opening up their minds to different types of policies, so long as the tone is welcoming. This is what's interesting with Biden. I mean, he's got a welcoming message for Republicans. He treads lightly on divisive cultural issues, but he hasn't capitulated on any particular subject. There's no policy bone that he's thrown to the right. He hasn't changed the party platform on abortion. He doesn't go as far left on certain things. He's not for single payer. He's not for AOC's version of Green New Deal and such. But the party as a whole was never there. That's not new. Biden is just resisting an attempt to pull them over there. Biden hasn't really done anything to pull the party rightward on policy. Just the tone is different. So it might be harder to do that dance once you're in power and you have to vote on things. But it at least is the beginning of a robust coalition that would give you, and keep this in mind too, Democrats already have a pretty solid electoral college head start. I mean, I know the argument about the skew. I've seen the studies that show that they favor whiter states. I'm not disputing any of those things. But just as a matter of mathematical fact, the states that Democrats have won 3 times in a row versus the states that Republicans have won 3 times in a row, Democrats have more electoral votes to start with. Excuse me while my computer is trying to pull up that data for you. But if memory serves, it was about 232 electoral votes that Democrats start with on that basis, and Republicans about 179. But when you look at the states that states Republicans have won 3 times in a row, well, that includes Arizona, that includes Georgia, that includes Texas, that includes South Carolina. So we don't know if those states are going to stay that way going forward, whereas there aren't any states that Democrats are at risk of flipping red right now. So it is, again, we're doing hypothetical on top of hypothetical here, but we don't know how Republicans in office are going to react if they see in the data that some real shifts have occurred within their party. I mean, they still have a hardcore Trumpy base, no matter what, I'm sure. You still have that, QAnon faction that seems to be slipping in. But some sober-minded Republicans might look and say, that this is not sustainable. Maybe we can hold on to, Alabama and Arkansas this way. Maybe we can hold on to Idaho and South Dakota. But there may not be enough on that basis. And I mean, they're going to have to make a decision. Do we do what we did to Obama? Do we try to obstruct on everything as much as possible in order to hobble his presidency and make it easy for us to return to power? They may do that. I don't put it past them. Mitch McConnell is, a hardball person. He's not going to come across the aisle easily. I don't think any strategy by partisanship really centers around McConnell, so long as he is not the majority leader. But we don't know if other senators are going to conclude the way we've done things the past 12 years, it got us 4 years of Trump, but what did that really get us? I mean, if if just getting a Supreme Court judge, three Supreme Court judges in 4 years, I mean, if that's all you care about, maybe you wait another 20 years for the pendulum to swing back and you hope you get another crack at the judges at that point. But that may not be enough for some people. So all I'm saying here is, don't look at these poll numbers and say, well, Biden has this in the bag, so I don't have to do any work. You want to run up the score. You want to win as big as possible. You want to win as many Senate seats as possible, and keep your mind open to what that might do to the Republican Party. Just because they did things one way in 2009 is not a guarantee they do the same thing in 2021. Look at my live chat here. I see a question about the Senate. I mean, right now the Senate map is much broader than anybody thought going into this year. I mean, the fact that you have competitive seats in Alaska, South Carolina, Kansas, Iowa, Montana, Georgia. I'm still keep my eye on Texas. I know Hagar has been lagging. I think her name ID is poor, and she doesn't have a lot of time to fix that problem. But if she can fix that problem, let's say Biden did a visit to Texas. He hasn't really done a lot of visiting in the reach states. He hasn't done any joint visits with Senate candidates. If there's one person I suggest he do that for, it would be Hagar, because I think she could use the name ID boost, because Cornyn's numbers are kind of soft. So that race could end up closer than it looks like right now. But even if that doesn't pan out, you still have all these other states that are within a point or two the Republicans are nervous about. And they're all running Biden-style campaigns. They're not running Bernie-style campaigns. They're running as moderates. They're running as problem solvers. They're attacking their opponents as overly partisan. So, at minimum, there's some appetite for that kind of message. It becomes harder. It's easier to run on bipartisanship in theory than in practice, because you actually have to do the deals, and the deals have to be relatively popular. You can have a bipartisan deal that everybody hates. But that's the way they're running. That's what Biden is selling. And if it works, does it affect how the Republican Party proceeds from there? And one thing that's interesting about the Iowa race is, after the Supreme Court vacancy opened up with Ginsburg's passing, I mean, abortion, Biden has not really driven the abortion issue in talking about the Supreme Court, but it's obviously in the air. Iowa is not known for being all that culturally liberal, but the Democrat there, Teresa Greenfield, has a very stout pro-choice position, which she reiterated in the last debate, while Joni Ernst, who is very conservative, was trying to say, oh, don't worry, Roe won't get overturned. She thought it was in her interest to tell Iowans that you should not assume Roe v. Wade's days are numbered if Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed. I don't think she would say that unless she had data telling her that's what she should say for Iowa. So it's just an indication that people should not make casual assumptions about these states. I mean, there are people that thought that Doug Jones could never win Alabama because he was pro-choice. However awful Roy Moore was, abortion would be just an albatross around his neck. Now, of course, Doug Jones is probably going to lose this time around, but he was able to win once in a special election with that position. So again, and I believe Jamie Harrison in South Carolina, I'm pretty sure he's pro-choice. Forgive me if I haven't tracked. If he was pro-life, I think I would know. I don't know if he's had any kind of nuance on the subject that I should be cognizant of. But he's certainly more pro-choice than Lindsey Graham, I'm sure. He's hitting Lindsey Graham on the judicial nomination issue. And this is the fact that it's close at all in that state tells you that state is changing. There is an influx of college-educated suburbanites in these states, changing the complexion of these states. Well, I've gone on for a long time. Thank you all for those of you in the chat. I see Chris Jones telling me, Trump did the same thing during the debate on Roe. Also, I agree. Also interesting, and I hope to do more of these. I plan to do more of these in the future. I appreciate you folks talking to me during these, and I'll catch you later in the week. Take care, everybody.